Hello and thank you. Today we're going to go over some basics of utilizing ClinTrialWorks.com CTMS. The first thing you're going to do is log in by using the email as well as the password that was assigned to you. Once you log in, you will see this dashboard, and the dashboard includes some commonly used objects as well as a main menu across the top. We're going to start with entering in a contact. A contact is a patient that you will track through a study. A contact can also be an industry contact or a IRB contact or staff members, depending on how your site decides to utilize this centralized database is basically what it is. So when you select Add Contact, it's going to bring you up this screen that shows you some of the general demographic information for your patient. You can choose to put in all of this information or just what's available. All right, now we have a patient that's part of the database. You can add diagnoses and medications to that patient's file. And that way, at a later date, if you want to query your system on patients that have certain diagnoses or medications, then that information is available. The Studies tab is what studies that patient is enrolled. Let's go back, and we're going to use a patient that's already part of the system so I can show you actually how that works. So within the contact details, you'll see the patient's name, and then these tabs are all relevant to this person, Bugs Bunny. So we have diagnosis medication. There's not been any entered, but if we wanted to, we can just go here and enter in something that would be relevant for that patient. The same with medication. If that person is taking a certain medication and you want to attach that to that patient's file, you can definitely do that as well. The Studies tab will show you whether or not the patient is currently enrolled into the study, or if gives you the option of enrolling that patient into the study. Here it looks like Bugs has been part of the Novartis study as well as the October Test Study 2017. Visits. I'm going to show you all the visits that the patient has completed through the studies. And of course, some of this will make a little bit more sense once we actually get into walking through setting up the study, adding contacts to the study, and then tracking them as well. I have documents. Documents is pertinent to that particular contact. So if you wanted to enter in or upload a document that would be contributed to that patient, such as like an informed consent, you could do that in this area. And then communications is just that, communication back and forth with the patient throughout the trial. Or if they're not in a trial, maybe they're interested in a trial and you want to keep that information, you want to keep the contact as part of your database, you can also attach communications that way. Okay, so that's an overview, a short overview. ClinTrialWorks is really simple to use, user-friendly. So everything there is pretty much straightforward. Not a lot of thinking to do. Okay, next area we're going to go to is the studies. This is the kind of the guts of the entire CTMS, of course. Setting up your studies, tracking your patients through your studies, and then tracking your financials. Here is a list of studies that are part of the system. As you notice, we're only showing the active studies. If we wanted to see the inactive studies, we would do that. And you see there's a whole list of inactive studies as part of this demo system. None of this information is real. It's all been made up for the purposes of demoing our software, ClinTrialWorks.com. Add a new study. Once again, we have this nice little pop-up, very generic, just giving you the details of the study that you can enter. Study name, the title, protocol number, and some of the other important information that you want to have as part of the CTMS. So let's go ahead and go into one of the studies that's already been set up. We can go to View. Once we click this, you'll notice again, just like the contact details, we now have study details. And these tabs are relevant only to this particular study. So we have the Phoenix study, and we have several different tabs that would be attached to that study. Screening is an opportunity for you to set up your study in order to screen your database for certain patients that would actually fall within the guidelines of the protocol, inclusion-exclusion criteria. Visits. These visits are actually the visits that are attached to that particular study. So it looks like we have 7 visits that have been set up for this study. This is also where you would come to actually add in the beginning after that first, when you add the study with the general information, then you're going to come here and you add your visits. Add your visit here, visit title, that can be anything from screening visit 1 or randomization visit, week 16, whatever your visit title would be and what makes sense to your site, you would put that there. There's certain types of visits, of course. It can be a screening visit, a protocol visit, randomization visit. It could just be a telephone visit. One note I will tell you is that there's several drop-down lists that are throughout the system, and those are all customizable by your admin or anyone that has admin access. This length of visit, schedule interval, and interval range all has to do with setting up an auto-generated schedule for your patients. So if you enter in that information, then you can use the auto scheduler, and I'll point that out once we get to the schedule module. Procedures are just that, things that are protocol required throughout the study for each visit. You're going to add those. I'm not going to do that now for the sake of time, but I will go in and I'll show you one that's already set up. So if we go to edit here, each one of these procedures were added to this visit. The staff member or provider would be the person responsible for making sure that procedure has been completed. So again, we're just in setup mode. We're just setting up the study. Okay, so we can actually go here, and when we're setting up the study, there's a clone visit here. If you have multiple visits that are almost identical, then you can use this clone button. As well, maybe you added a visit that was a mistake. You don't want to necessarily go in and edit it. So you can just delete it. And then you can move your visits up and down depending on the order. Very easy. Okay, so now what we've done is we've added a contact, we've set up a study. The next most important thing to do, of course, is the budget. So here is where you would set up your study budget. Once you set up your visits, then your budget, the budget template is automatically generated. Of course, none of these costs will be part of the budget. This is something that you would set up. So once you add your visits, and you go into your budget, and each particular visit has a budget line item associated. Now what's neat about this is because we've broken it out that you can actually set up your clinic fee or your site fees, meaning so you can keep track of actually how much it's costing you to run the study. You have your sponsor fees as well, and that can be based on a per procedure or a flat rate. Many of the studies and budgets that we've seen over the past kind of give you those two options. More or less, most of them are set up on a flat rate per visit. But of course, you have that by procedure. If you wanted to track each procedure cost, you can do that for both the clinic or the site as well as the sponsor budget. And then you would complete these other details here that relate to the budget. We also have made it where you can invoice for certain things. So maybe you have invoiceables that are not included on the main budget, but you still want to keep track of those at each visit, then you can definitely add that as well. Okay, so once we get the budget set up, then from that point, we can start tracking our patients through the visit. One thing I skipped over was this patient section just because I wanted to make sure that it made sense. We set up our patients, we've added a study and the budget, and now you're ready to start looking at your patients within the protocol, within the study. So you have a list here, again, study details all relevant to just the study, and a list of patients that are part of that study. This list of patients will show you their tracking status. Looks like we have a patient that's been randomized, completed, and a couple that are just enrolled in the study currently. You have the option to put in screening and randomization numbers, and then it'll also show you their last visit. And if you click on this details tab, what it's going to do is take you back to the patient details. So we won't do that now because I don't want to jump back, but it'll take you back to the patient details. But I definitely will, at the end, go back through so you can see, again, as a reminder, what that looks like. If for whatever reason you need to unenroll a patient, you would do that here. Okay, so let's go ahead and say we have this Brian Roberts, and we're ready to track some of his visits. Of course, he already has some. This is for demo purposes, but what we're going to do is we're going to go back and actually add another visit to him. So once again, contact details. This is for Roberts. His visits are listed here, so it looks like he's had 2 visits. If we wanted to add another visit, we'd say add visit, and we're adding this visit to Brian Roberts' information. Add visit. We want to add let's do visit 2 because it looks like that visit was skipped. Visit 2, we put in a date and a time here. So then we want to, you have an option of keeping track of your patient stipends if you're paying out patient stipends. And we're going to say due, and whether or not you would come back in here and you can actually select when that stipend would be paid on or has been paid. Once again, it's a report. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but it is a report that you can run on your visit status. Right now we're just scheduling the visit, but you have options for completing that and canceling the visit as well. Of course, we want to schedule the visit that it's on the schedule. Those are the different options here for, the different procedures that are related to this visit. Save. All right, so now we have visit 2 scheduled after the visit has been completed. So tomorrow around 9:30, we would go back in here, would say edit, and we would complete this visit. Once the complete action has been taken, then that's when your financials are updated. So if you have an amount that's attached to this visit 2, then it's going to update everything. Every amount that you have attached, whether that's a clinic fee or the sponsor's amount that the sponsor owes, it's going to update that as well. Any invoiceables that may be due, as well as if you're doing particular provider payments. The system is designed to keep track of if you have outside providers that you're paying certain fees to, then you can also track that as well. Okay, so that is really it. Now there's some more functions, of course. There's the schedule. I didn't go into the full schedule. I will go through the billing piece just so you can see that a little bit. Adding an invoice, tracking an invoice, paying an invoice as well. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, these are all invoices that have been set up within the system. So if you click on billing, it's going to show you those, and you have an option of looking at unpaid for invoices, all invoices, or paid invoices. We're going to go ahead and add a new invoice. I know that over the last couple days we've tracked a few visits, and we want to create an invoice. Now, the invoice is a little tricky because some sites will send those out physically to a sponsor, and if that's what you're doing, perfect. The system is designed to do that. Or some people just keep track of it as an internal accounts receivable system, accounting system, if you will. So even though you're creating an invoice, you may not actually sending that invoice anywhere, but you want to make sure that you account for those funds or those monies that are due. Okay, this part's pretty self-explanatory. How you decide to use a description It's totally up to you. There is an invoice number that's automatically generated. If you want to add any notes, if this is for a particular study, then you would do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the test sponsor and the Phoenix study. I'm going to add that. Once you select both your study and your sponsor, then it's going to bring up these three options. You had the add study items, add expense items, and add invoiceable procedures. Now, those are pretty self-explanatory. Add study items or anything that's been tracked and you want to visits per se. So let's go ahead and add those two study items. And notice that our dates, it's only going to capture anything that's been done within those dates. Okay, so we had those, and you can add expense items. If you had anything attached to your budget as expenses and you want to go ahead and add those to the invoice, you can do that. A lot of times people will create a separate invoice for those things. And then add invoiceable procedures. These are things that have been selected as invoiceable within the budget and added to visits. So when the coordinator's going in and completing the visit, they'll say whether or not that procedure was done, so that whoever's doing the invoices will have a trigger that says, hey, by the way, you have these invoiceable items that you can also add to the invoice. Many times, of course, this is also done separate. You don't have to do all of these three things on one invoice. You can pick and choose what you add to what invoice. All right, so we have all of our information here. It's going to show you what your invoice is going to look like. And then you save invoice. Now, we have this invoice, $1065, $1550 is the balance. We can go in there and we can view that invoice. We can also go at this point, once we start receiving payments, if you select pay, you can select to pay. You can pay the amount in full, or say for week 3, they only sent us $400. We can do that as well. And they haven't paid this. So it's going to show you the balance now is $650. That's because we just paid some on it. We view that. It's going to show you the payments that have been received. So it looks like $900 has been received. All right, there's some other options such as editing the invoice. Maybe you added something to the invoice that you didn't necessarily want to be added, so you can delete that off. All right, so that's invoices. At this point, I would ask if anyone has any questions. Okay, then we can go into the reports. So there is several reports. You may see some reports that you like, some reports that you don't necessarily need. And I always tell my sites, my new sites, that if you get into CTW and you see that there's a report or notice that there's a report that you think you would need or would like, we can definitely design reports. Reports are very easy. So we add those on the fly as sites ask us for those. We'll add those in. So we went through the contacts, we went through the studies. The schedule is just that. It's a calendar built in. You can track your patient visits from that. You can run a report to show different visits. You can view this as well by week, month, day. And this particular site has a lot of people, so you may only want to see 1 or 2 of those persons. Billing, and billing is all about the financials and the invoices, of course, and then the reports, as we just talked about. And that's it. That's ClinTrialWorks in a nutshell. Of course, as you decide to want to see a full demo, we can definitely go into more details. If this is used for training purposes, if you need an additional training session, we can definitely set that up. Alrighty, well, thank you. ClinTrialWorks.com.